Hello and welcome back to another video here on the Watford Analytics channel. Today's going to be something a little bit different. Obviously there's been quite a lot happened in the last, few days, including today as well. There's been some news this evening as I record this, which is on the 15th of September. It'll be out probably tomorrow morning by the time you see this, on the 16th. But there's quite a lot to discuss. This is an opposition breakdown, kind of. I'm not sure how much we're going to focus on Sunderland. There are some things to discuss if we get to it, but mainly I wanted to look at Watford, where we're at. It's been an interesting week. Game against Blackburn was terrible, to put it mildly. I saw a lot of regression there. I've gone back, I've watched the game, I looked back over it. Trying to dig into what's gone wrong, why it's gone wrong. There's obviously two kind of schools of thought which aren't necessarily separate, they're also intertwined and so on, but is it the coach? Is it the playing staff, the recruitment sort of thing? What's happening? Why are we finding ourselves in this position where we started off, we thought we might be seeing some incremental improvements, and we're not really seeing that. It's actually some regression. And after I went back and watched the Blackburn game, I definitely say regression is a fair way to describe it. We're not doing particularly well, and I wanted us to kind of look a bit further into that. So sit back, kick back a little bit. And we're going to discuss it and see if we can kind of break this thing down and figure it out. I've taken some notes in the game. It wasn't fun watching it back, but I did think it was necessary to do so. I've got some questions in. I asked for some of your questions, so I appreciate those that got sent in. The way I'm looking to format this video, I'm going to talk more from a tactical perspective, so we are going to spend some time looking at the tactical board today. I would love to have some footage to break down with you, but I did get my video pulled instantly last time that I posted match footage, so I have to be careful with that. Although we do have some stills that we'll look at, but we'll mainly be using the tactical board just to break down and talk about this Watford team, what we're looking to do, what we are doing, and maybe what we should be doing, or where we could potentially help solve some of the issues that we've seen so far. As I said, if we get to Sunderland, we will. But I'm not really sure how long this video is going to be, and we'll go through the questions too. But I'll go through those principles I taught, those points I talked about in regards to the team first, and then we'll look at the questions. We'll definitely go through all of them, but if they have been covered by the first part of this video, then we'll acknowledge them and so on, and we'll explore any parts that weren't quite covered if there are any aspects there. But I don't want to obviously make you guys watch the same thing over and over again, but again, I do appreciate them coming in, and then we'll look at the individual questions which are separate from what I've covered, and we'll go from there. So there's lots to discuss, and then we'll get into the news that's also come out recently as well, because that's kind of interesting too. So lots to discuss. We'll start off with the team, and we'll start off with the shape. And I know some of you are probably quite familiar with this, but we'll go over some of the principles real quick of the 3-5-2 and talk about what we should be seeing and what we expect to see from a team playing in that way, and how we can potentially improve, and what we aren't seeing, what we should be seeing as well. So we'll get to that right from the off, actually. Just make sure it's correct. Okay, good. All right. So starting off with the tactical board here. So 3-5-2. The basic shape, obviously, we're all familiar with. But we know what we're looking at right here. Foundation of it. We're talking from a possession standpoint first and foremost, because this is where our problems are lying, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions too. It's quite evident to see. The use of the ball has not been good. That's a combination of things. It's getting out from the back, it's getting into midfield, and finding ways to get the ball forward. We've all seen how isolated the front of the pitch can be, despite how talented we are in some areas of the pitch. We're not able to get there, and we'll discuss why. So just going over the principles and what you expect from these players individually as well, the roles, the profile of the player. Firstly, the goalkeeper, it's the benefit of the back three. You have options for the goalkeeper. He's going to be involved in building up. If you're playing with the back three, generally you're looking to be a team that is going to build up from the back. So Daniel Backman, option-wise, he's going to have the three centre-backs. Traditionally, what you're going to see the two drop back on the outside. You could step in to create an option and maybe even create a three through the middle here. Or, he can hold that position. You've got the outsides, and you're asking of the team to either press or stay. Against us this season, a lot of teams have decided to stay, which I think is the right decision, which we'll get to. But these are the options. In an ideal world, in this situation, or one of the options, maybe not an ideal world, but the opponent could press. look to close those short options, and of course the fullbacks, wing-backs pushing up. You've got the clip ball out to the sides, and you've got that favourable match up there. If the players are quick enough to do so, and the goalkeeper's quick enough to find that space, then that's obviously a good option. What we do find against us, though, as we've seen, and as we'll discuss, is teams are going to be a little bit more compact. They're not going to feel threatened by our ability to break that press. So rather than pressing aggressively, such as we just marked out there, they can still have the ability to do that, but once the ball is played, right? So once the ball comes out, then they can engage in that press quite quickly. And we're not really finding ways. We're not finding ways around it particularly. However, there is another situation which could arise too, which is, again, if you do have that press engaged, if they do want to be a little bit more aggressive through midfield and so on, get these players covered nice and quickly, then there's no reason why. Sorry, just give me 1 second between these. There's no reason why we can't be more aggressive with the ball forwards. These situations here where they press from goal kicks or build-up situations, you're just asking for the ball forwards, the 3-on-3 that it creates. If you have these players involved here, getting a little bit further forward, you have a 3-on-3, and this is a situation that's favourable for us. That's a position you can go longer. But as I said, teams aren't necessarily doing that against us, and for fairly good reason. We've not really shown that we can break out of it particularly. Anyways, they've not really had the need to. Just reset for us real quick. Bear with me. So what we're seeing is more compact play from the opposition, allowing us to get the ball from the back and try and break them down. Asking us, what can we do? How are you going to test us? What's going to happen? And that's common. But what we should be seeing is the ball coming out wide. Outside centre backs getting the ball nice and quickly. But we'll talk about the roles of these players and why perhaps it's not working. So the goalkeeper, obviously, you want someone that can play the ball and play it quickly, sharp enough. Is Bachmann that player? Potentially, but I think he's good enough for that position at least, for what we should be asking of him. It's not overly complicated. We're not a team that's necessarily playing out the back in a overly technical way. And I'll break that down a little bit now. So the back three, you've got a few options. You either play with a middle centre back who's someone that's going to step in with the ball. He's going to be the player that can step up. Think David Luiz at Chelsea, someone that can carry the ball a little bit and is happy to play and play forward. That's not what we have in Francisco Siriata or, Cabasele's played there, Truster Congo played there, Matty Pollock or whatever. These are more aggressive ball-winning players. Players going to make the tackle, make the challenge, and they're there to be aggressive. That's what Siriata suits, and that's why this back three really suits him as a player. The outside centre-backs, out of possession, you need to be covering this area here, this zone. This is the zone that we've got to be really careful of. This is where attacks going to come that could be threatening, and you have to be athletic enough to cover those positions. Courtney House is definitely that. He's not necessarily overly quick, but he's very physical, uses his body well, and gets there well. Cathcart reads the game well enough to kind of make up for lack of athleticism, shall we say. In possession, though, we make up a little bit there in Courtney House by having a left foot. Craig Cathcart is okay there, but ideally you want these being more of the ball players. They've got to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more confident in possession to find some of these triangles, some of these diamonds that will create to get the ball into progressive areas. And that's something that's definitely hampered us, and that's one of the reasons why teams are willing to sit back a little bit. Wing-backs, obviously, we know the importance they have. Two-way players. Rob Edwards at Forest Green like to play with two-way players. You can be maybe a little bit more lopsided. The right in Kane Wilson was a little bit more aggressive and more influential, but two players again that are getting up and down the pitch, and we are a little bit limited there as well, just with the chopping and changing and wrong foot and so on. All these situations we've had at right wing back. Two central midfielders, we play with a double pivot, so we play with the two deeper players. There's nothing to stop you really in this sort of situation, especially when you're kind of building up to drop one in and maybe bring two down or two up, and create some asymmetry, have some options in that way. But we do stay quite stagnant with the midfield too, the double pivot, and that's an issue for us, and we'll get to. Ideally, you'd have someone that's a little bit more box to box, and I think it's no coincidence that the best games that we'll go full screen here. Hold on. The best games that Kayembe have come from being that carrier. When he does pick up the ball, we look a lot more effective when he brings the ball up the pitch and carries it further. So a box-to-box player there is ideal, but right now we've kind of just depends on the day with Kayembe. Sometimes he's that, sometimes he's not. So that's something we need to improve on for sure. Number 10, you want picking up those half spaces, dropping in wide, finding that ball, picking it up, creating angles, creating diamonds. We'll get to that shortly, but João Pedro or Yasser Asprilla do that quite well. The numbers here, we can kind of don't pay too much attention. I'm choosing this based on a mixture of what I'd like to see / what we have available and what's likely to be seen. But we'll go with this for now. We can change it around a little bit depending on what we're discussing. But for right now, number 10, João Pedro, he picks up those areas. He creates opportunities to get the ball. He does get on the ball. It's just getting it to him is tough at times. And then the two strikers, you want to pin back the centre-backs. You want them to be forward and be aggressive and just pin those guys nice and early, which we have done. So when it comes to creating space, in this sort of situation, you've got to have rotation of the midfielders and you've got to have speed and ability. Now, João Pedro is a key component of this. We talk about creating diamonds. And when we have Pedro playing as a striker and Asprilla playing as a number 10, we'll demonstrate both ways. So firstly, we'll talk about João Pedro playing as a number 10 in this situation here. He's key to making space, especially if these two guys aren't going to be too involved in doing so. So moving into these half spaces, getting commitment from these defenders, you're creating rotations, but João Pedro is dropping into these areas and you're creating diamonds. So just to illustrate that, sorry, bear with me. Okay. You're creating these situations here where you are getting the ability to progress the ball from these areas. So, hold on. What is going on here? Okay. Well, you see my point. So you have the ability to get the ball into these areas, get around the player, and get the ball forward nice and quick. We're not really doing so right now because we're not having the freedom of movement from midfield. Why can't I get rid of this now? Bear with me. Okay. We're not really having the freedom of movement from these players at times because the midfield can be quite stagnant. Chowdhury plays at a tempo, but Kayembe has been struggling a little bit. But if we can create those diamonds consistently, whether it be this side or down that side, you have got opportunities, even triangles in these situations. If you play quick enough, there are routes to get the ball forward, and we have to be smart with doing so. But again, is it tempo? Is it instructions? Is it quality of player? It's up for debate, but I think it's a mixture of them all. But I'd say probably leaning a little bit more towards quality and the instructions that are given because of quality. I don't believe that Rob Edwards has complete faith in all of his players, and I think that plays a big part in this for sure. We'll talk about if Asprilla is occupying this role. Let's just put Asprilla in here for Sarr, just for argument's sake now. So what he does give you here, essentially what happens when Asprilla plays, okay, this is going to annoy me. When Asprilla plays, we're effectively offering ourselves the fluidity to go from a 3-5-2 into a 3-5-2 at times, with João Pedro offering more of a forward option, but also a 3-4-3. And that's because we can get wide. We can get those players into the half space. And this is a much better look for us, in my opinion. I think we find at least better in finding the routes to goal, just because, again, we have the space available to us now. So we'll discuss that real quick. Let's give me a space here. So these are the sorts of positions that we can create. Okay. All right. You know what I mean. Jesus. Alright, this is a mess, isn't it? You know what I'm trying to say here. But we're creating these opportunities to get the space, get the ball into these areas, and create these avenues of getting the ball forward, because it's difficult for the opponent to stop these sorts of movements here. Obviously, they can press, they can do so, that's fine. But if we're playing with confidence and tempo, we have the ability to get the ball around nice and quick. The problem is, we don't. We find ourselves in what we've described many a time as the dreaded U. I'm going to illustrate that for us because it's something we've all seen time and time again. Firstly, I'm going to show it on the board right now. and then I'm going to show you the still image of it as well, just to see what we're talking about and kind of make it a little bit more poignant. The team can play compact against us, allowing space in these areas, and what happens is fullbacks drop deeper than we want, wing-backs drop deeper than we want because they're desperate for the ball and trying to get the ball forwards, and we create the line across the back, just going back and forwards, back and forwards. Now, we did have this illustrated in some stills. I know Luke got some up. I'll call you Luke, sorry mate. Luke got some up here, and this is the one that I think illustrates the most. There's some other images here, but just for seeing more on the pitch, this one's a back four as well. But for the back three, this one's a good example because look, you got Kayembe there, Chowdhury, flat. Fullbacks or wingbacks are pushing up. Obviously, the natural pass here is a cross, and it goes back inside and back and so on. But you have got Asprilla picking up the space there, which is creating those avenues. But we've got that Rotherham team that are sat here very deep and compact, and that's what teams are going to do against us again because they don't have to respect the ability of our outside centre backs to play the ball forwards. So they're comfortable doing so, and it stacks the odds in their favour. So we have to try and find ways to execute. And those sorts of positioning, that sort of positioning we just discussed is the way to do so. But at least we do have Asprilla picking up there. But you see, as we push up and offer too much, we haven't got the progression of the centre backs driving into midfield, which is also an option. And that's what we get left in that situation. In that sort of situation there, let me just see who's on the ball again. Okay, so centre back is on the ball. We're pushed out to the side. Yeah, so I mean, this is an opportunity really in these sorts of situations. I'm gonna get rid of this tool. Hold on. These are sort of situations where in this position we've got be a little more inventive, a little more aggressive. He can pick up into these spaces. We can drift and we can find ways to play forward again. But it is asking a lot of centre backs that aren't necessarily comfortable playing there, and that's the problem we've had with the likes of Cabaselli and Trustakong or whoever's occupying those outside centre backs is not particularly effective. And even when he gets to wing back, we've also got our issues there as well, which doesn't help, which does kind of leave it to being quite a personnel problem too. Also, what's going to happen a fair bit, because we haven't really shown the quality again in personnel, oftentimes it's easy for a team to commit to a side and press and set traps. So when we have the ball in these positions here, if I'm a team against Watford, I'm quite confident to bring these players across as we move, look to build up the pitch. Give me a second here while I just illustrate this for us. Step up a little bit. There's no issue with finding that space, coming across and closing down. See what a good team would do in this situation, what a good Watford team would do in this situation. You'd have the quality to play in, bounce back and switch perhaps. You want the width from the opposite fullback to get opposite wing back to get up, and that's what the switch is on. We don't switch well. I want to illustrate that. I'm looking to build a graphic actually to demonstrate our switching and our issues when trying to switch actually, because we have struggled to do so. It's not been something that we've been consistently good at. We have to find ways of being a little bit better in that position, whether it's through build-up or quick switching, but technically, ability-wise, it's not something we've shown consistency on. Chowdhury's had a few opportunities, but Kayembe, often we've seen when he gets in the position to do so, so often the pass is going behind the player. It's just drifting behind the player, and it's just not effective at all. So yeah, these are kind of the situations we've been talking about and we've been seeing on the pitch. It's been frustrating, and there are ways to deal with it. And as I said, João Pedro being in those positions, Asprilla or whoever's playing in those areas has to get back and find those half spaces, get deeper and pick up the ball. I'll reset again just so we're ready to go on to the next piece real quick. Bear with me again, please. But yeah, it's tough to watch though, and it's especially when we've got some quality out there on the pitch in the forward areas. It's tough to see the ball just simply not getting to them. But I do think there is room for improvement. Of course, I do think we have players that can improve or can do better in this sort of system. But we have to see it quickly, and we have to see confidence from the coach, from the players. But I do feel that there's perhaps a little bit of a lack of trust to some of the players in this team from Edwards, which I think is also justified as well. It's not exactly like it's harsh to say that. I think it's fairly clear that at times they've not really been good enough. We'll switch this back to Ismail Assar because we are playing, I'd imagine, a fair amount of him. So yeah, that's kind of the fundamentals of our issues in progression there, and how we can find ways about it. I don't expect to see that change too much in terms of compactness of the opponent until we show um, more flexibility and ability in executing this sort of breaking of opponent down. There's no reason for teams to adapt and change styles. If teams start to press, I actually think that suits us because it gives us more freedom in some ways to play forward. We're struggling with the responsibility of breaking teams down. That's an issue for us, and Rob has to find a way out of it. The ways I'm illustrating, I think, are good ways to break that. I didn't realise I actually got rid of one of these on the zone there. But yeah, so we'll move on. 1 second. Let me just put this back because it's going to bother me. If it lets me, that is. I'm struggling with this today. Okay. All right. So that's that for now. We'll get into questions now because some things we've covered, but some aspects I think we're going to ask more detail and talk about some other areas that we haven't. This is my opinion on where our frailties lie and our biggest issues so far this season, and what we need to address if we are going to improve and quickly. It feels quite evident we need to improve quite quickly because the results have been poor and the performances have been really poor. Another thing that I will talk about too is we haven't really talked much about off the ball. Off the ball, we've not seen as much as I really expected from us in terms of a turnover sense. I thought a lot of our offensive play would come from getting numbers forward quickly, turning over the ball in the opposition half or final third, and creating chances through that. We haven't seen that at all. The off the ball stuff's been quite passive, so hopefully that changes soon, and maybe if we can start to get teams to come out a little bit, we'll be able to, because right now it's difficult when they are so compact. We kind of expected it based on the fact that we are a bigger team, relegated parachute payments to players. It's common that teams are going to sit back, but as I said, it's kind of it's favourable for them in more ways than one that they do so because of our deficiencies actually suit them to be doing so. Alright, so we'll look at some of the questions now, and we'll go over those. So starting with not a question but an observation. This is from Henry. I noticed that Bio drifts to / is put on the right, notably against Borough towards the end when he was right mid in the 4-4-2, held a wide right position at times last night as well. So in reference to the Blackburn game at the end there, and yet that's accurate. Him dropping back is actually to kind of pick up space and find those angles that we discussed, picking up those triangles, diamonds. He's an intelligent player movement-wise. I think Bio's quite good. Execution is not always there in the build-up, but he gets himself into good positions. Let's pretend this is Bio for a second. He gets himself into good positions, coming wide to create that space, as we discussed, but also in the box he's a smart player movement-wise as well. As I said, execution is not always there, but he's been good. Against Borough, that was actually a decision from him, or potentially Edwards, but I think that looked like in-game decision there to switch with Espria. He was occupying a deeper, more wide role and really be the player that could win those aerial battles. They're at the point, Borough, in that game where they were switching the ball. They're playing those diagonal passes into that channel. And Bio, with the physical presence and the size, was just more of a defensive threat in aerial duels there. So it's actually a smart defensive decision, a good team decision from Bio in that game. So I do appreciate that, and it's a good one to notice there, though, Henry. It's very true, it's accurate, but that's the reason as to why. From Jeremy, our front players look isolated. Our formation looked more like a back five, not a back three. Why the wing backs end up so deep? Now I think we covered that, but just to reiterate, in that situation, it's purely because the U shape is being created because we're not finding avenues. The players, if they do go forward, are having to come back to try and get on the ball and be an outlet. Because when these centre backs are getting the ball, they're a little bit lost. They're a little bit late into getting the ball at times. So the wing back has to come back and help find an option, an avenue to pass to, and that's where we end up with that shape, and that's why they're so deep. Sean, what we try to do, I can't tell if Edwards is struggling to find a system at the moment, or whether he has a plan that isn't working because of the terrible players available to him. Mixture of the two, I think. I think, as I said, I try to illustrate there what Rob's trying to do based on the combination of what you'd expect from a 3-5-2, what we've seen, but also what he's done at Forest Green Rovers. Now, I'm a little bit surprised we use the double pivot as we do. These two players here are the surprising ones. I'm quite shocked that it's not been drilled into Kembe to be more aggressive. Maybe it has, and he's just not doing it, but he's still getting picked. So that's the main surprise. But we are trying to progress the ball through midfield. We're just not doing a very good job at doing so. Pedro's dropped deeper. We saw Asprilla drop deeper at times as well. But tempo's not there, and confidence in possession is not there. And is it a Rob issue? Potentially. It's also definitely a player issue as well. So that's something that has to be addressed. But in terms of what we're trying to do, it's really execute a fairly simple 3-5-2 is what my opinion is there. Peter Smith, why do we continue to play with two in the central midfield? Each time we change with three, we look more balanced. Yes, it adds risk to counter-attack, but at times on Tuesday we had 7 in a row at the back and a huge gap to the front three. It just entices teams to press against us. Yeah, it does, and that's what we discussed just now in regards to that U shape. It in a struggle to find possession, we end up pulling ourselves deeper. If we turn over the ball, we are deep, we're compact, and we're so far away from that break. And then when we do get it, we're struggling to get the ball into those forward areas because we're not playing quick, smart interchange. We're playing long, forced build-up and panicking. When we do end up with the ball in that U shape again, the tendency is to bounce in, bounce back, across, bounce in. Eventually, one of the centre-backs decides to go long, and most of the time we lose possession, and the whole cycle continues. That's why we hate seeing it. Mastiano, Coke or Pepsi? Not big on either, to be honest with you, but if I had to choose, I'd probably say a Diet Coke maybe, but not a massive Coke or Pepsi guy, to be honest. But thanks for the question, Matt. Are the issues you find solvable with the present squad? Yes, in a sense, you can patch some of these problems. You can make them better. Solvable, maybe not actually, but helpable. That's not really a word, but yeah, you can aid them. You can make them better. As I said, the movement from Asprilla, from Pedro, players that are smart, able to get into position, asking a little bit more of them off the or when in possession for us to get in and into a place to receive the ball. Imran Louza coming back, I think, will help a lot. I'm not saying he's the be-all and end-all, but I think he adds a different dimension in terms of these sorts of positions now. If you had someone like Imran Louza, much more confident in him drifting across that line there to pick up the ball, demand the ball, and when he receives the ball, looking to play. We talk about those switches where the wing-backs are getting up high when the opponent are pressing to one side. I do feel much more confident in Louza being someone that can execute that sort of cross-field ball and allow us to break a little bit more. It's a shame we're relying so much on one player in that sense. Very much like when we waited for Will Hughes to get back last championship campaign. But I think we can get by, but a smart team, a smart club would invest in the right areas to help this team overall, I think. Matt, with our current playing squad, excluding Loser and Tom Delibashiru, what would be the best formation and productive style to go with? Also, will everything be better when the injured players are back? Yes, I think it'll be better if, and it is an if, we do improve on the elements we've just discussed. I think it's possible, for sure. The best formation, I think, is the 3-5-2. I actually don't think that Rob is wrong there. Best formation, not necessarily. I think it does suit some of the players we have. There's no formation, in my opinion, which suits every player in the team, and that's down to our recruitment, our mismatched recruitment over the years. It's been all over the place. We've gone for value over fit so many times, and we've been left this real situation where no matter what system you go with, there are going to be holes. There are going to be players that don't fit, and you're stuck there. We're in a transitional phase. Hopefully, we're actually transitioning into something more positive. But based on the current, for lack of a better term, meta of football right now, 3-5-2 is versatile, it's flexible, it also offers itself positively well for different stages of the game. So whether you want to be more defensive, balanced, offensive, it's good because it allows you to, if you do get promoted, you can shift to a more defensive style, more counter-attacking style with the players that you've brought in to fit that system. So I like the 3-5-2 or the three at the back, just say as a foundation with the 3-5-2, 3-4-3. Even if you play as a 4 at the back, you have that midfielder, whether it's Chowdhury, whoever, dropping deeper as a central player, just to give you that flexibility in and out of possession. I think it's the best thing for us. I think we really should commit to recruiting for that right now as well, just because it does suit the current game as is. So we'll continue with that. So that's one positive I say. At least we've got a coach that's maybe doing the right things in some respects. But yeah, so I think it's still the right thing to go with, and I think it will get better. Maybe not perfect, but it will give us more of a chance when we have some of the players back from injury, especially Loser and Tom Bashiru, to pick out two. What has Edwards seen in these players that makes him think passing out from the back is a good idea? Well, it depends. I mean, if you're gonna play those guys, it's tough because you have the shape in mind, you have the formation in mind. The house goes down. You lose Tom Bashiru. You don't have Loser back yet. You don't Sunderland right wing back. You don't. It's tough, and I get why Rob is persisting with what he does, because it's what he wants to do. It's what he does. It's how he plays, and to change from that, it's tough. It's not necessarily stubborn, but I don't think we're overly better in the four at the back either. I think we still find ourselves in a situation where the centre backs get exposed and the full backs aren't quite good enough in those positions to help us there. And I think the shape is right. I just think that he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So completely get what you're saying, but I think we still could do, even with those players there, we still could do a better job of finding the way forward. So reply from Stephen: "Is stubborn is going to play through at the back until it kills him." Serious question. What is he potentially seeing to prevent us deploying a back four? Well, a back four doesn't solve our progression problems, for one. We might potentially get the ball to our forwards a little bit quicker at times, but I think in possession and build-up wise, we still struggle. And defensively, I think we're frail. The centre-back position can be okay, but we saw Siriata's not overly competent in that position, and you take him out of that back line and you're left with the Cabasellis, Akongs, Cathcart. I think is actually better in the three now, in my opinion. I don't think we look better there. I think the three is the way to go. That's my opinion. Obviously, Steve, you might obviously have a different one, but I do understand Rob sticking with a three when he can. Paul: "Why do you have so many gaps between our centre halves when we play a three? A system which is made to stop exactly that type of thing. Is it purely down to players not being good enough?" I think assessing danger has been a bit of a problem for us, and the gap, obviously, you mean out of possession, of course, and that has been an issue. But this is also an element of mobility. When you don't have overly mobile players here, it is a position which requires a lot of ground. Obviously, this zone here is highlighted for possession-based reasons, but if you look at it from a defensive standpoint, this is often the area that the defenders have to cover. It's the biggest defensive area in the pitch that a player is asked to cover, and for us, it's almost the least mobile of position of player. These need to be hybrids of centre-backs and full-backs in a way, and they're really not. Cathcart is good at reading the game, but there's always the opportunity or the ability to get isolated there. If the team play against you quickly, then oftentimes the ball can come in the box and the outside centre-back is still not in position, and that's what happened previously. In regards to Blackburn, there's also it wasn't the Blackburn game, it was the previous one where against Rotherham, where Cabaselli, I know there's a Siriata here, but Cabaselli was in this position and just wasn't assertive enough to clear the ball. So I think it's pretty much personnel in that situation. You can perhaps coach to improve, and maybe Rob should be asking more of his players, but he's in a difficult situation. I do sympathise with that. But the space you're saying isn't wrong, and I think that Rotherham goal, the goal in the Rotherham game they scored, is a good highlight of that. Could we play a more asymmetrical system with width on the left provided by a wing-back, but a more traditional full-back plus Sarr on the right wing with everyone fit? It could look something like this, or am I being silly? More generally, how symmetrical does a formation need to be? That's from Jez there. No, it's not silly at all. Formation we discuss is the basic starting points, but the fluidity that comes with it is always it's very rarely completely symmetrical. I think that is an option that I would consider. Yeah, I think what you've highlighted there is good. Gaspar's someone that can play a little bit more with the ball at times. Not the best crosser, but I do trust him a little bit more in possession. Defensively, he can be decent. Kamara, obviously, playing on the left is good. João Pedro, as we discussed, dropping into that half space, I think from a wide position is fine. because he is going to be playing much more centrally if Sarr's on that right-hand side. You would maybe like more support from a fullback than Gaspar can offer there, but this is a decent way of thinking, and I don't dislike it at all. But you still have to stick to the fundamentals that we discussed, creating avenues of attack and ways to get the ball forward. But Sarr does like to play in wide areas. We've seen him look a little bit uncomfortable at times. If you give him the flexibility to get wide, then that's great, because that formation there's nothing to stop it from being more balanced as well, and just asking a little bit more of Gaspar offensively at times, even if it's not as proficient. It's a fair way of trying to attack this thing, and I appreciate the thought there, Jez. So you're not being silly for sure. You're just thinking in a different way, which is completely acceptable, and I don't think it's a bad idea. And then Cameron replied, that just means the left side defence are free to crowd out Sarr. He needs a wing back with him to pick up a man like Kiko did. I think that's that's a good point. It's definitely another point, but none of these things are perfect. There's always a counter to it, and that counter by Cameron is correct. But you always try to take the strengths and weaknesses of every situation, and maybe trying it out isn't a bad idea. Paul, what do we need in central midfield for it to work better? Rotation. Rotation again. Box to box play, comfort to get into different positions when the ball comes forward. Can you pull across? Can you be confident in possession? You're not going to lose the ball. Can you create diamonds that way? Can you get Sarr into these positions? Make these defenders work against them. Try and cover these spaces, and we can find ways to get forward. I think Loser again can help that. But we need confidence. I think is more than anything. We need confidence and ability. And I do think we have that waiting for us, or potentially waiting for us to come. But that's the main thing we need, is those two things. Thanks for the question there, Paul. Adam, do Kiembe and Hamza work together, as in they're both defensive and don't pass forward enough? No, not really. I think what you just said there is exactly it. If Kiembe plays as the ball-carrying Kiembe, sometimes he can. But as a two, I think, as a double pivot, I don't think they're good enough at all. Not because they're not... Kiembe's up and down for me, is still very hit or miss. Chowdhury is good, I think, at what he does. But it's not a good match, it's not a good combination in midfield, especially when it comes to progressing the ball, as the team is expected to do so against a compact defensive unit we've quite often played. Vic bait balls down the channel behind the wing backs, centre backs getting sucked out wide, and others leaving people free in the centre to score. Yes, exactly. Birmingham, Borough, Blackburn, all goals with two centre backs out wide, leaving no one in the middle when we concede. This can't be how you're supposed to defend with three at the back. No, not at all. It's not, and I think we've highlighted that pretty much. We kind of talked about the mobility. The big irony for me is that it sounds like Edwards' team last season was all about getting it wide, overloading and lots of balls into the box, yet we're conceding them from out wide almost every game. Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. That is where we're at. When you can't progress the ball in midfield, you are going to be leaving those centre-backs in those wider positions and not in a solid unit to be in a place to defend, because they are having to try and get wide and spread that ball back across. If you lose the ball in those situations, if you're creating that wider space, you lose the ball in midfield, suddenly the counter-attack, you're in a very vulnerable position. We found ourselves there a few times. Jeremy, this is the problem with three at the back. It's very easy for opposition to disrupt it. Yep, Jeremy's right. Russell, all along straight balls by our left centre-backs, right centre-backs. Is this by design or something going wrong? If so, what should be happening? Will it change when Loser comes in? It's not by design, it's panic. It's lack of options. It's under pressure. It's not by design. No, it's just lack of execution. Loser will help that, I think, because his movement will allow us other options for those centre-backs. As we outlined, the centre-backs aren't ball-playing centre-backs. Perhaps those outside centre-backs might have more ability to play some different sorts of balls forward in those situations, but because of what we have, they are playing long, they're playing direct, they're playing hopeful. So yeah, it's not by design for sure. Watford Zen, we're too easy to play through, unable to block passing lanes and or create our own. What needs to change? I think we covered that, Zen. I hope we've covered that, I think, so I won't kill that. I won't do that one to death as much as I can, but I do appreciate the question. It was the important question. That's why we covered it early. Why, when fit, are we playing Kamara right wing back? I get we don't have any other options, but what's the appeal of playing a left footer on the right for Rob's system? I think it's just the options, Harry. I think he trusts the diminished returns you get from Kamara playing on the right over what he actually has behind him in Gaspar and Kamara and Ngakia, which is, says more about the other two. But Ngakia played against Blackburn, so maybe he sees that as the route forward. I know he likes Ken Sema for sure, but if he sees Ngakia as an actual option there, then we'll see. I thought from what we did see against Blackburn, obviously he went off injured and the whole team didn't play well. I thought he had energy. He showed some better possession in the defensive area, but I thought going forward we still saw the same sort of things from Ngakia, which do trouble me a little bit, especially when we need so much in those wide players. What would you do to get Sarr on the ball? That's a good question from Gary. So getting Sarr on the ball, I think if you're playing him, you have a couple of options. Either you do switch to a 3-4-3 to allow him some more space, but I think that the real thing for me is either you have Pedro and Asprilla in these positions, which I think is probably unlikely. So let's just say it's Davis here. It's movement from Pedro. It's finding those combinations, and it's Davis with the interplay there. We've seen how he can be a bully in that kind of deeper midfield area. Sarr's just got to be able to float, got to be able to drift, and he's got to be able to play aggressive and take risks. Risk being offside a few times. Get off the shoulder, get on the ball, and carry it. That's what we need. And if Davis is able to occupy those positions, he can draw players to him. Davis is a physical player, but also he has good touch, he has good control, and good technical ability. If you can get the ball into him, he can draw a couple of players around him because guys bounce off him. There's movement, there's opportunity for Sarr, and I think getting Sarr on the ball for me relies on these two guys here. If Davis and Pedro are able to excel in these positions, these deeper areas, which they play in a lot, you might be seeing more of that. You might be seeing more of a offensive kind of structure of this sort of position right now, where it's not so much Davis as a target man on the last man like you might expect. He occupies quite deep positions, deep, a little bit wide, and I think that brings Pedro into play quite effective. Brings Sarr into play quite effectively. That'd be how I'd do it. It feels to me that Kamara is more effective on the left. The stats agree. They 100% agree, Mark. He's definitely better on the left, for sure. You're not wrong. Sam, how much of a difference can lose and make? Or is the biggest issue a lack of confidence and ball-playing ability in our defence? Well, you nailed it on the second part. That's exactly one of the reasons why we're struggling. And he can make a difference there, because I think he brings both of those elements to the game, to the team. He has confidence, he has ball-playing ability, so he can make the difference. Gary, why despite having Sarr, Pedro, Bayo, Asprilla and Davis are we scoring so few goals? We're just not getting the ball up there enough, Gary. It's just we're not getting the ball into attacking situations. We're not controlling games. We're not penetrating. We're blunt for the reasons we've outlined, and unfortunately, it just goes to show. It doesn't matter how good that forward line is, if you just cut off the avenue to getting there. As teams are doing well, and fair play to the teams we're playing against. They're assessing and they're identifying our issues quite quickly, and they're capitalising on them. So it's up to us now, as players, as the coach, as Rob's not immune from criticism, or at least analysis of what he's doing, to say that we could be doing more. Midfield, possession, pass, completion, forward passes, chance created, etc. Not sure the question is there. Sorry if I've missed that. Are we able to be a pressing team with the current players? That is a good question, yeah. So I think we are. I do think we are able to be a pressing team, but I think a lot of it does rely on us being more advanced. And when we are struggling to create so much, we're naturally starting so deep. But you look at the players outlined here. If you have Davis and I'd like to say out of possession. Just kind of look at the shape we can kind of put together here. So out of possession, we do have the ability to drop deep. I think I'd like to see us play this more a little bit out of possession. Allow Pedro and Sarr to drop a little bit wider. And from these areas, this is where you create the fullback disadvantage. A lot of time, possession is lost in these areas. If you can be aggressive with these players, kind of take up that 3-4-3, force them into midfield. I do think we have the ability in these guys here to press off the ball. If you can get the ball wide, which is naturally where it's going to go to the fullback, especially from centre backs or bouncing back out from the midfielders, this is the opportunity to use the athleticism and aggression of these players. Pedro is actually very good off the ball. Sarr works hard. Same with Kamara and Pedro works hard. Same with Kamara and Sarr. You can press into these guys, and you make it difficult for them to play through. You force them into midfield, and when it comes to pressing and turnovers, the goal is always to force them into favourable situations, and you create the favourable mismatch on the outside with the wing back and the striker, or the attacking midfielder number 10, whatever you want to refer to him as. But if they're going to take a risk, you want the risk to be inside, because the inside pass is always where it's frail, it's fragile, and it's a high risk pass. So if you create the mismatch on the outside, you force them inside, and that's favourable too, because if you don't win it, you can get back, you can drop back those players, but it's asking a lot of these guys to pick up the ball, back to goal, and play out there. You're asking for quality from the midfielders, and that's always much more advantageous to the defending team than an easy ball down the line, or go out of play. You want to force them inside, you want to force them into high-risk areas, and you want to close the easy ones. So I do think we have the ability to play in a more aggressive pressing way. And again, I'm surprised we haven't. Whether that's fitness of players in terms of injuries, we've missed some players that maybe suit that a little bit more. I think that's one thing Ngaka could bring, is he could force some of those presses a little bit more too. I would like to see more of that soon, because I do think it will help us offensively too, especially when we talk about struggling to get into attacking situations. I think that is one thing that we need. But again, it is helped by being more advanced to the pitch. Oftentimes the turnovers, especially for Forest Green as well, they're quite dominant possession-wise, and they're creeping up the pitch quite well. When they lose the ball, you can have that mechanism to switch and go to a defensive, press, engage the press early, because you're pressing from short distances, because you're already advanced. When you start a press when you're already so deep, most of our possession losses, or a lot of them, are coming from the ball at the back being long. We're losing the ball and we're still deep, so pressing is almost it's almost useless because we're so far away to be effective. But thanks for the question there, Chris, and Alan as well. Why midfielders can't progress the ball, from Andy, and Rob seconded this. I think we've covered that. I think Alan's covered that there as well. Are the players struggling to gel together? Yeah, that's a good question from Brandon. I don't know if they're struggling to gel. It's tough to tell, because we've just been struggling in general, so it's hard to say if the players are struggling to gel together. I think there's a certain... The square pegs in round hole situation always going to lead to at least some level of struggling to gel. So, yeah. Okay, I think that's it for the questions. Let me see if these are questions at all. Yeah, so that's it for questions right now. So we appreciate all those questions coming in. Genuinely, it's really good to have them come in, and I enjoy discussing them with you guys, and they're all good questions and points definitely worth being raised. Not too many of them are actually crossing over too heavily with what we discussed previously as well, so that was good. So yeah, next thing we'll talk about is the big news to come out from Andrew French. Exclusive sporting director Cristiano Gioretta is believed to have left Watford FC with immediate effect. So, given the situation we're in, we discussed, is it the coach, is it the players? And by players, we also refer to recruitment. Well, the club clearly don't feel happy with the role or the job that Giorgetta's done. I mean, a lot of fans haven't been happy. It's difficult for us because we have such a limited scope of understanding as to what exactly it is he's doing. As a sporting director, theoretically, he's the person orchestrating recruitment. He's deciding which departments have impact. He's listening to the views of all these personnel he has behind the scenes. Below him, he's in charge of, having the scouting network set up, or at least our scouting network crossed in with the Udinese, a little bit separate and different the way we do it. But he ultimately, the buck stops at him. He's the guy. So if the club aren't happy with recruitment, they've got to be looking at him. The interesting thing is, for us, so much of it is agent-led, and I'm not sure how much of a role Gioretta has in agent connections, like buyout, for example. It's tough to say. It feels like that's Pozzo's guy, but maybe it's not. but clearly not happy with the work that's been done. And I think it's really hard for us to assess, but the recruitment has been poor, no doubt. It's not been good, and moving Gioretta on, it might not be so much about him doing a terrible job. It could be, it could not be. It's difficult when Gino is quite heavily involved, and also Duxbury has a level of involvement too. But perhaps we are looking to move in a different direction recruitment-wise. I know we've obviously hired a head of recruitment for domestic purposes as well recently, but in terms of bringing in someone to kind of orchestrate things from the broader scale, bigger picture, as well as integrating from Udinese and our scouting network in South America and other areas in Europe, as well as domestic scouting. We might need someone with more of a pinpoint focus and allows us to be a little more aggressive, or at least approach the market in a different way. So moving on from Gioretta, I think it's an interesting decision, because at this point of the season right now, if this is Watford, I say the old Watford as if we're some sort of new Watford now, but in this sort of situation previously, coming into an international break, with the results we've had, there would be genuine concern if Rob was to lose this game against Sunderland right now, if he'd be sacked. And I think moving on from Gioretta at least shows a different avenue of a different approach from the club. They're looking at our areas outside just the head coach for changing, or for not blaming is maybe harsh, because we can't necessarily blame where we're at right now because of just Gioretta, but they're looking to change things behind the scenes, which I think is a good thing to do. I like this approach. I'm not advocating for someone to lose their job right now, but clearly there's some issues recruitment wise, and I think Gioretta is, is a figure you can move out and replace and bring some positivity if you bring in the right guy. I've seen reports saying that maybe they're offering more freedom to Rob Edwards. I don't think the club's going to operate like that. I don't think that's how they should do it either, because then you're looking at replacing that input as well if Rob's to move on or he gets sacked or whatever in the future. It's not even worth predicting, but you've got to be more stable there. And I think bringing in someone who offers a little bit more, I think Gioretta just... Again, I struggle to, as someone that's kind of been in recruitment for a while, I struggle to kind of criticise from what we see, because with so much we don't see. We see such a small fragment of his work, but clearly the club's not happy, and I think this is one of those situations where the fans are right. The discontent towards Gioretta, I think, might be justified if the club are also making this decision as well. So I hope we get to see more from that. I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops, what we do to address that situation, because the sporting director does hold a big role, especially in the way we operate too. He is the guy that ties things together. But whoever comes in now, I hope we have more of a view on tying in with the domestic scouting, bringing in that connection through Udinese again. Not necessarily having players across and so on, but just continuing the kind of scouting umbrella, but also looking at other avenues, as I said, domestically. Looking at different areas of working rather than just being tied to the agents, having the Udinese transfers, having the kind of random deals that come through, value over fit and so on. I want someone with a picture, with a broader plan, rather than this kind of short-termism turnover of players. We need to see a little bit more direction. It's a shame it's happening midway through the season, not at the beginning or kind of before the window started. But it is where we are. So let's see if we have any outcome of this in the next few days. Perhaps someone else comes in and we get to see some sort of announcement soon. That'd be great, but keep an eye on it. But again, it's good. And also, whilst we're here, Andrew French's article the other day was pretty good as well. Obviously there's some discussion with Backman after the game from some fans at Blackburn, and the article in regards to the club, talking about change and so on, I thought it was a good one. And another point too, we don't know that Gioretta was a response of fan reaction and so on, or these sorts of articles, but discussing these things publicly, airing your frustrations, opinions, whether it's good or positive, whatever, it does have an effect. And we don't know how much, as I said, these opinions and so on have had an effect on this particular thing, but I think it does show that fans aren't always wrong or always right, but it's worth discussing things. So keep the conversation going, because I've been seeing some good conversations in the last few weeks regarding Watford, both positive and negative, and there's been more open debate, which is always nice to see as well. So that's that one. This video must be running pretty long right now, I imagine. So Sunderland wise, next game coming up, hopefully we see some of the changes we've just been discussing the last however long it is we've been recording. A back three again we'll be playing against, to see if we have Sunderland up here. Obviously, they got an impressive 3-0 win away at Reading against high-flying Reading. And another 3 at the back system, this time a 3-4-3 or more so, but 2 number 10s rather than wingers necessarily. Patrick Roberts had a good game. What did he get? Yeah, decent numbers actually. 2 goals, 3 shots, decent. Pritchard did well as well from what I saw. Let's see what his influence was. And 1 key pass, but I mean the thing that's been talked about a lot has been the goal. Obviously, if you haven't seen it, the goal key up here, the audio. But it's playing out from the back, and it's a 3-4-3 sort of shape, different to ours. But these are the sorts of things we want to see. But look, we know it's the quick touch, it's the tempo, it's the movement, it's the aggression, the confidence to play, and the early cross, and obviously a lovely cut inside and the finish. But this is the sort of tempo we want to be playing at, and the sort of confidence we want to be playing with. So hopefully we see that coming up. I know this is a very short part on Sunderland, but again, it's a long video, and it's not long to the game. It's only a couple of days, less than that now, by the time you're watching this. So I hope this has been something a little bit different. We'll talk more about tactics and so on as it becomes relative. Because I enjoy doing so. And thanks again for the questions. I enjoy those questions coming in. It's always good to talk with you guys and talk about the stuff that you actually want to hear about. So yeah, thanks again for listening. We'll probably end the video around here, I think. So if you don't already, give me a follow on Watford Analytics. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you want to. If you don't want to, then don't. That's fine. If you want to reach out, have a message with me, have a chat about anything, football, not, then feel free to do so. And I will catch you all in the next one. Thanks for watching, and I hope we win on Saturday.